Line 2 is for you. Whoever it is, sounds freaked.
I picked up the dangling receiver.
Jakob? Is that you?
Hi, Grandpa Portman.
Jakob, thank God. I need my key. Where's my key?
He sounded upset, out of breath. What key?
Don't play games. You know what key?
You probably just misplaced it.
Your father put you up to this. Just tell me. He doesn't have to know.
Nobody put me up to anything. Did you take your pills this morning?
They're coming for me, understand? I don't know how they found me after all these years, but they did. What am I supposed to fight them with? The goddamn butter knife?
As usual, I did my best to calm him down. You're safe. Everything's fine. I'll bring over a video for us to watch later. How's that sound?
No, stay where you are. It's not safe here.
Grandpa, the monsters aren't coming for you. You killed them all in the war, remember?
Not all of them. No. I killed a lot, sure. But there are always more. You stay away, hear me? I'll be fine. Cut out that hunks and stab them in the eyes. That's all you gotta do. If I could just find that goddamn key.
The key in question opened a giant locker in Grandpa Portman's garage. Inside was a stockpile of guns and knives, sufficient to arm a small militia. He'd spent half his life collecting them, traveling to out-of-state gun shows, going on long hunting trips, and dragging his reluctant family to rifle ranges on sunny Sundays, so they could learn to shoot. He loved his guns so much that sometimes he even slept with them. My dad had an old snapshot to prove it, Grandpa Portman napping, with pistol in hand. I repeated the lie that I didn't know where it was. There was more swearing and banging as Grandpa Portman stomped around looking for it.
Fah!
He said finally.
Let your father have the key if it's so important to him. Let him have my dead body too.
I hung up and called my friend Ricky for a ride. 10 minutes later I heard the unmistakable throaty honk of his ancient Crown Victoria in the parking lot. The engine rattled to life in a cloud of blue smoke. As we left the parking lot and rolled past strip malls toward Grandpa Portman's house, I began to worry about what we might find when we got there. Worst-case scenarios included my grandfather running naked in the street, wielding a hunting rifle, foaming at the mouth on the front lawn, or lying in wait with a blunt object in hand. Anything was possible. The sky was turning the color of a fresh bruise as we pulled into my grandfather's subdivision. It wasn't easy, even though I'd been to visit my grandfather countless times growing up, because each house looked like the next. Street signs, half of which had turned a blank, and blisterous white from sun exposure, were little help. The only real landmarks were bizarre and colorful lawn ornaments, of which Circle Village was a veritable open-air museum. Last one on the left, I said. Ricky tapped the accelerator and we sputtered down the street. At the fourth or fifth house, we passed an old man watering his lawn. He was bald as an egg and stood in a bathrobe and slippers, spraying the ankle-high grass. The house was dark and shuttered like the rest. I turned to look, and he seemed to stare back, though he couldn't have, I realized with a small shock, because his eyes were a perfect milky white. That's strange, I thought. Grandpa Portman never mentioned that one of his neighbors was blind. I rang the bell and waited. When there was no answer, I banged on the door, thinking maybe the bell had stopped working. The quiet made me anxious as I fetched the extra key from its hiding place. Even in the fading light, I could tell the house was a disaster. It looked like it had been ransacked by thieves. Bookshelves and cabinets had been emptied, the knickknacks and large print Reader's Digests that had filled them, thrown across the floor. Couch cushions and chairs were overturned. The fridge and freezer doors hung open, their contents melting into sticky puddles on the linoleum. My heart sank. Grandpa Portman had really, finally lost his mind. I called his name, but heard nothing. I went from room to room, turning on lights and looking anywhere a paranoid old man might hide from monsters. Behind furniture, in the attic crawl space, under the workbench in the garage. I even looked behind his cabinet, though of course it was locked, the handle ringed by scratches, where he tried to pick it up. Out on the lawn, a gallows of unwatered ferns swung groaning in the breeze, while on my knees, on the astroturfed floor, I peered beneath rotten benches, afraid of what I might discover. I saw a gleam of light from the backyard. Running through the screen door, I found a flashlight abandoned in the grass, its beam pointed at the woods that edged my grandfather's yard. A scrubby wilderness of sawtooth palmettos and trash palms that ran for a mile between Circle Village and the next subdivision, Century Woods. According to a local legend, the woods were crawling with snakes, raccoons, and wild boars. When I pictured my grandfather out there, lost and raving in nothing but a bathrobe, a black feeling welled up on me. Every other week, there was a news story about some geriatric citizen tripping into a retention pond and being devoured by alligators. The worst-case scenario wasn't hard to imagine. A peal of savage barking broke out nearby. The barks faded and the chorus of night insects rose up in their place, droning and alien. Sweat trickled down my face. It was dark now, but the breeze had died and somehow the air seemed hotter than it had all day. I picked up the flashlight and stepped toward the trees. My grandfather was out there somewhere, I was sure of it. But where? And yet, something seemed to guide me anyway, a quickening in the chest, a whisper in the vicious air, and suddenly I couldn't wait another second. I tromped into the underbrush like a bloodhound scenting an invisible trail. I was about to give up when I spied a narrow corridor of freshly stomped palmettos not far away. I stepped into it and shone my light around. The leaves were splattered with something dark. My throat went dry. Steeling myself, I began to follow the trail. The further I went, the more my stomach knotted, as though my body knew what lay ahead and was trying to warn me. And then the trail of the flattened brush widened out, and I saw him. My grandfather lay face down in a bed of creeper, his legs sprawled out and one arm twisted beneath him, as if he'd fallen from a great height. I thought surely he was dead. His undershirt was soaked with blood, his pants were torn, and one shoe was missing. For a long moment I just stared, the beam of my flashlight shivering across his body. When I could breathe again, I said his name, but he didn't move. I sank to my knees and pressed the flat of my hand against his back. The blood that soaked through was still warm. I could feel him breathing ever so shallowly. I slid my arms under him and rolled him onto his back. He was alive, though just barely, his eyes glassy, his face sunken and white. Then I saw the gashes across his midsection and nearly fainted. They were wide and deep and clotted with soil, and the ground where he'd laid was muddy from blood. I tried to pull the rags off his shirt over the wounds without looking at them. "I have to move you," I told him, sliding one arm under his back and another under his legs. I began to lift, but he moaned and went rigid, so I stopped. I couldn't bear to hurt him. I couldn't leave him either, and there was nothing I could do but wait. So I gently brushed loose soil from his arms and face, and thinning white hair. That's when I noticed his lips moving. His voice was barely audible, something less than a whisper. I leaned down and put my ear to his lips. He was mumbling, fading in and out of lucidity, shifting between English and Polish. "I don't understand," I whispered. I repeated his name until his eyes seemed to focus on me, and then he drew a sharp breath and said, quietly but clearly,
"Go to the island, Jakob. Here it's not safe.
It was the old paranoia. I squeezed his hand and assured him we were fine. He was going to be fine. That was thrice in one day I'd lied to him. I asked him what happened, what animal had hurt him, but he wasn't listening.
Go to the island.
He repeated.
You'll be safe there. Promise me.
I will, I promise. What else could I say?
I thought I could protect you. I should have told you a long time ago.
I could see the life going out of him. Told me what? I said, choking back tears.
There's no time.
He whispered. Then he raised his head off the ground, trembling with effort, and breathed into my ear.
Find the bird in the loop on the other side of the old man's grace. September 3rd, 1940.
I nodded, but he could see that I didn't understand. With his last bit of strength, he added,
Emerson, the letter. Tell them what happened, Jakob.
With that he sank back, spent and fading. I told him I loved him, and then he seemed to disappear into himself, his gaze drifting past me to the sky, bristling now with stars. The strangest feeling came over me. I let go of my grandfather's body and stood up, every nerve ending tingling with an instinct I didn't know I had. There was something in the woods, all right. I could feel it. There was no moon and no movement in the underbrush but our own, and yet somehow I knew just when to raise my flashlight and just where to aim it, and for an instant in that narrow cut of light I saw a face that seemed to have been transplanted directly from the nightmares of my childhood. It stared back with eyes that swam in dark liquid, furrowed trenches of carbon black flesh loose on its hunched frame. Its mouth hinged open grotesquely so that a mass of long eel-like tongues could wriggle out. I shouted something, and then it twisted and was gone, shaking the brush. And then I must have blacked out, because that's the last thing I remember.